Well, you guys are quick getting good at this. First technique I want to show you is a sewing technique, and I'm going to use bullion. And maybe that wasn't the best choice of colors because of my shirt, but you would utilize this. It's really a combination of things. It's a stacking as well as a sewing. So what we're going to do is use some silver dollar eucalyptus leaves and some some hypericum. Gaelics are next.
Sorry, your camera person is occupied at the moment.
That's all right. What happened?
It just got loose.
Well, I can still talk and you can work. The bullion works nicely for this because it's strong and sturdy, but yet when we get the material on, it will be soft enough that it will hang. So this is a stacking as well as a sewing. So I'm going to cut some of my berries off. And the first thing I'm going to do is fold my leaves in half. And I'm folding them across the breaking sort of the midrib. And on the very first one, I'm going to just poke my wire through and then come back all the way to the top. So it's going to go through and make a loop on the bottom and then go back up. So this is going to be the base of the stack. And twist that a couple of times, trim out the wire. Am I holding this okay?
Can you just be still and turn it how you show the loop on the back? Okay, just be still for a second. Okay.
And then I thread a hypericum berry on. Now this could be a bead, doesn't have to be a berry. To use as a spacer between my next leaf. And so the next leaf then gets folded and it just goes on one insertion. So it just is pierced right next to the midrib. And then slide it down. Now it wants to open up. That's why you put another berry or a bead that helps stabilize the stack. And a little bit of it being open is okay. And that's what you just keep repeating this over and over. And these are quite nice for tall arrangements, and you need something coming over the edge. They dangle over the edge of a tall cylinder. You can also use them in large bridal bouquets. Oh, that berry, there we go. So I'll do a couple of more on here, then kind of show you where you would use it.
Use cranberries?
These would be, yeah, you could use cranberries. They're a little soft for a short-term party. Easily you could use cranberries. I was just going to say though that you could make these with some eucalyptus or ruscus and use them on wreaths and have them hanging off of a wreath. The eucalyptus will dry, and if you use beads, then you're good. If you have berries on there, then you're going to have to think of it as a short-term Let's put one more set on there. Now you could also string this, so it wouldn't have to be on a wire. It could be on a piece of kite string or, you know, a small nylon string. I kind of like the wire though, because it comes in so many colors, and a little bit of it will show, and you get a little bit of that glittery, kind of a glitz to it. And so every angle of it's going to look a little different. Okay, so that is a stack, eucalyptus leaf stack.
So where are some places that they could use them?
Well, I just said that.
Huh? Did you already say that?
Yeah,
Sorry.
hanging out of tall containers, or hanging off of a wreath, or bridal bouquets. You'd probably do more than one. You wouldn't just have one. You might do 2 or 3 of them.
Front of the head table.
You could use them on swags, I suppose. They don't work well for a garland. It takes way too many at the grouping of where your garlands meet at the points. You can have these as dangles,
They're not real big.
but you wouldn't make the garland out of it. I don't think that's.
You could make some crazy floral jewelry.
Oh yeah, here.
There is not sufficient disk space to continue recording.
Don't. My computer's acting up. I should be there, but it's not. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, so that's the first technique. Now the next couple are an example of what's called leaf work. And again, we're going to use leaves for this. So let's just say you have some plastic containers that maybe aren't the prettiest things in the world, or you want to change them for a particular reason. Well, leaf work is when you overlap it, sort of like fish scales, and you cover up totally what's underneath. So this plastic vase then has this eucalyptus glued to it, and hopefully you can tell there's a total difference between this and that. Now again, this is going to be relatively short term. This would be for a party or an event. But if you use eucalyptus, and maybe you'd overlap them a little bit more, they will dry, and it can become permanent. You'd have to spray it afterwards so that the leaves aren't crunchy. You'd use a dry seal or super surface sealer or something to make it a little bit more permanent. But how you do this, there's several ways. I like to use Oasis glue for my gluing. Some people will use rows of double stick tape, or heavens, I know a couple of people that use glue dashes. They put a glue dash on every one of these. It's like, oh my word, that's like forever. But what I do is just take my Oasis glue and just put a little thin squiggly all the way. I'll do it a halfway first, or it'll dry too much at the top. If you let it sit for about 15-20 seconds, then it gets real tacky. And let's pick a couple of good leaves, and then I generally overlap at the bottom, and then I'll just come back and cut that one off. So it's pretty quick, pretty simple. Now if you're using a vase that doesn't have a facing, like this has 6 little sides to it, you would just start at the bottom and make a ring all the way around the bottom, and then just keep going up. You could come from the top down as well. You don't have to go from the bottom to the top. I'm going to start. My leaves are getting smaller, so I'm going to use 2. Now when you get to the top, you can do one of a couple of things. You can just trim it. Well, this didn't come out exactly right, but so if I wanted to get this little lip covered, I just put a little more glue on top of those leaves. And put one more layer up here. Make sure they're all stuck down nice and tight. And then on the bottom, you're just going to trim that so it sits level. And my suggestion on the top is to do the same thing, although with these soft eucalyptus leaves you could just roll them over and glue them. They tend to pop off though when you put too much pressure on them. Now you can leave these little flaps so that you still have sort of a surface or a facing, or you take a little spot of glue and you glue each one of those down. I did that over here, so I glued these down, but so you can see the difference there. That's leaf work. With eucalyptus. Other leaves that you could use for this would be English ivy works really nice. So you got some large English ivy leaves, Pittosporum, Ruscus, especially Israeli Ruscus. This is Israeli Ruscus. So these leaves would be coming off individually and glue those on very nicely. Did I say Pittosporum already? Mm-hmm. So those are some of the, there's a lot of leaves that work, and however some of them are so small it takes a long time. So eucalyptus really works well because they're pretty large and they cover a lot of surface area. Salal will work. That's another nice big one. Also called lemon leaf. It's not lemon at all. Not even.
Hydrangea leaves.
Ooh, hydrangea leaves don't last very well. They're big. And they cover lots of surface, but they're soft, a little too succulent in nature. You can also do leaf work. Doesn't have to be on the sides, it can be on the inside. So I'm using Galix on this one, and I'm just gluing it to the inside. This is a pretty inexpensive, it's made by Smithers Oasis container. And what I'm going to do is put these last 2 or 3 on there, and then you would put foam in the bottom of this or use a Kenzan. For the base of it. Looks like I need a couple at the top. I really want to cover the whole container. So a couple of these smaller ones. So it has kind of a ruffled top to it. Now it doesn't take much Oasis glue. If you put too much on, it sometimes discolors your leaf. Alright, so now that would be all the way around, but you could also get creative and maybe do Galix here and then some English ivy leaves and then a few Pittosporum leaves and Salal or something. You can also turn your leaves right side up here and then turn them upside down over here, so you get different textures, alternating them all the way around. It's kind of cool too. So you could put a little block of foam in the bottom of this, and then your design would cover the base so that you're not seeing where your leaf actually stops. Or you can use a Kenzan a needlepoint holder and do an arrangement, and then put gravel or some small rocks around the outside of the Kinzan to hold it stable. So that's two examples of leaf work. Okay. Then
Should we move those for you?
well, I'll just put them back here. More decorations. Let's do a real quick hand tied. Put my glue away.
Do you want to do this one first?
Oh yeah, let's do that one. I forgot to bring that over here. Before I do the hand tied, I want to do a real strong sheltering technique that involves some sewing and an aspidistra leaf. Now this is a case where the midrib of the aspidistra needs to be soft. So use the warmth of your fingers and massage that midrib under there until it's got a nice curve to it. So it's going to curve very easily, especially if there's a little pressure. So what I want to do is, a sheltering is when you create, think of umbrella. So something that's going to go over the top. We did some sheltering with the equisetum with the pave yesterday, but that wasn't a real strong shelter. It's kind of a soft or short. Oops. So what I want to do, pretend there's a design down here, a pave, lots of interesting materials, and then I want to do something above it to make the design look larger. And so I'm going to put my aspidistra in, but aspidistra have this tendency to be ornery and they don't stay put. And so I can do a little sewing technique with some lily grass. And I'm going to use my knife and cut some slots or slices in the top of the leaf. So I want the lily grass about right there, start with. So I'm just slicing some holes, and I'm going to do probably 3, so that's going to come over, under, there. We'll start with 1 and we'll end up with 3 or 4. I know the tip's going to be too weak, so I'm going to cut it off. And I'm just, oops, I need to have 4. Well, we'll just do 2 to start with. And now when I use my lily grass this way, it holds the leaf in position. And I want to do that 2 or 3 times. And I'm going to reverse my lily grass. So this was the base. Now I want to start on this side with the base. Otherwise it tends to pull the aspidistra in the wrong direction. And so this is a sewing technique on the top. And what you'll end up with is not only a sheltering, you will also end up with what's called caging. So you will have the illusion of some sort of cage over the design as well. So I'll put 3 of them in here.
Cassie wants to know if you can teach him how to properly use the frog. In a minute when you get done.
How to do what?
Properly use the frog.
The Kinzan? Is that what you're
Yes.
properly use? Okay. Try to make sure your lily grass are in alignment this direction. So you don't want a little bulb thing like this. So that needs to go in a little bit more. So there's that one needs to come down a little bit. Your sheltered caging, sewing. So we got a lot of techniques in that one. So again, imagine some really interesting base down there.
So would you make your arrangement first and then put that on, or would you do it the other way?
Yeah, the arrangement goes generally first. You know where you're going to insert these along the side, so you kind of leave some space there. Alrighty. How to use the Kinzan. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but this one was recently used and I still have some rocks stuck in it. So Kinzans used to, and probably still are by many people, adhered. So you would use this clay-like material and stick it down to the bottom of your container. I find that to be a little overkill because they're generally very heavy, or at least a good Kinzan is very heavy. And so the stability of it is just mainly going to be a sliding issue around in the bottom of the container. And that can always be contained with some rocks or with some gravel. So you would always work in the Kinzan with water in the vase, so that when you're inserting the stem onto the Kinzan, it's going to immediately be taking up water. So think impale. That's really what you're doing with the Kinzan. I'll just use this Hypericum for an example. You want to impale it on one of the spikes or 2 of the spikes, and you want to push it all the way down to the bottom of the Kinzan, not just on top. And that makes it very stable. Now, be very careful if you have a tough stem, a woody stem, a branch or something, and you're pushing it on there, that you don't slip, because your hand will slip and you will impale your hand right onto that Kinzan, and it's quite painful. Now you can also, if you've not, can you zoom in on the, while it's in here, or should I take it out?
Well, tell me what word.
Small stems.
Yes, I can get that.
I have a question. Do you cut the stem at a slant or flat for the Kinzan? It's hard to get water with it flat, but
It's a soft slant. So almost always a slant. Otherwise, you press it down too close on the base.
Do you need something from the cooler, or are you good?
No, I think I'm okay. So the limitation, or the perceived limitation of a Kinzan, is you have to use large stems, because the needles or the spikes are, a distance apart, and your stem is smaller than that distance, then you can't use it. Wrong. You can use any size stem, as long as you have another stem that's a little bit bigger. So I'm going to use the bottom of this Hypericum, and I'm just going to make a little short piece. It's only about an inch long. And I want to put some Flexigrass in this. Well, Flexigrass is teeny tiny, and certainly smaller than the gaps between the needles. I'm just going to take my stem, my larger stem, and bind it on. I generally use black, that's not long enough, bouillon. Well, I had 3 of those to start with. I don't know where it went. Stems are so small, I seem to have misplaced it. Anyway,
See that great blue square there?
well, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So now I have my 3 stems of Flexigrass and the larger stem of the Hypericum. I'm just going to bind that together all the way to the top of the Hypericum stem. So it's not in just one point, it's the length of that little piece of Hypericum. Twist it 3 or 4 times. And now I have a stem large enough to put onto the Kinzan. Now don't try to push it with the smaller stems. Hold it with the larger one. And then there you go. You can also, if you, in a design, you need a slant. So you don't want everything vertical. You want some of the Hypericum over on the side. So you can make angular designs in a Kinzan. Again, a misconception. Some people think only upright. Not true. So you'll take your stem and you want to work into just the top of one of the needles. So I'm just going to push it down onto the needle just a little bit. And then you really need another stem, or you need a little skewer. You can actually get special tools for this too. And then you're going to push it down at an angle. So it's not only impaled on the base, but it gets impaled on the side. So underneath here, it's going to get impaled on the stem as well. And you can get almost any slant that you want out of it. And again, they're very stable.
Ask her if that's answered her question.
So did that answer your question? Was it Cassie?
Cassie.
Yeah. Oh, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir, did. There's a delay.
Okay, so on to the hand-tied. Last demo to start today. Now, there are several ways to do hand-tieds, and I think what Katie was wanting to see was a spiral, which is the most difficult, by the way. And for any of your hand-tieds, it's going to be best if you have all your materials pre-done, preset, stems clean, and sort of in an order of usage. So what I'm going to make here is a pink and white design using some of these humongous Pink Floyd roses. I mean, they are huge. Some pittosporum for foliage, and actually I have 3 foliages. I have pittosporum, I also have some Israeli ruscas, And then I have some Italian ruscus, just one piece of that. So I'm going to set that aside because it's taking up too much table. Now, with a spiral eucalyptus, spiral,
Words are hard.
oh, I'm telling you, hand-tied, you have to think from the center to the outside. So you have to make what you're going to have in the center first, and then you start building all the way around it. Unlike an armatured hand-tied, or more of the American style of hand-tied, is you're making a design on all the way around all of the time. So you don't start in the middle and just make rings around it. But to make a really truly good spiraled hand-tied, you have to start in the middle, and then every stem that you add is added around that one. And so we're going to get going here. I'd like to start this kind of hand-tied with a bushy, branchy foliage that I can use or will be seen in from many angles. So if I were to start with just one little piece of Italian ruscus or Israeli ruscus, it doesn't work quite so well. This also helps maintain some of the angling too when you have a branching structure. So the center of this hand-tied is going to be one of these great big Pink Floyd roses. So that's how I'm going to start, with two pieces or a rose and then some pittosporum. Now hand-tied is always typically using two fingers, thumb and first finger. I'm right-handed, so my left hand is holding it. My right hand is the manipulating hand that I use to add things to it. So I have my center, and then I want to add some things. Let's just say, let's add a mom. When you add anything, it's at almost a 45-degree angle. So it's got to be across the midrib, all right? Well, I got to get that rose in the right spot. First. All right. So I want it at a sharp angle, and it goes on the outside edge. And then I can also add another one. And here's another trick for you. If you add and turn, you're always going to be adding in the same direction, and that's key to this as well. So I've added one in this direction, so now I'm going to turn it. And then I'm going to add another one in that same direction, but it's next to it, the top. But see how the stems are slanting across? Turn. Get that rose back up in the middle. And now let's put a dianthus in there. Turn. And let's put a ruscus. And let's put another mum because I don't want to get too lopsided. Trying to keep my flower heads similar in height. Turn. I'll try to do this sideways so you can see what it looks like from the top. And let's put a campanula in there. Turn. And one more dianthus before I switch gears here. So there's what it looks like so far. So there's my center, and look at the base. It's a mirror image of that with the stems splayed out. Now let's put a couple more roses in. Actually, I'm going to do 3 roses. Again, I want to add all at the same angle. So there's one there. Turn.
So now you're moving down a little bit. So
I'm shortening the stems a little bit now so that it's going to round this down. And let's put another campanula there. Nice contrast. Get back over there. Rotate. Rose. rotate. Now it's getting pretty substantial. Get another campanula. Nice thing about a hand tied, I can see that dianthus has decided to go down farther than it should, and I have to find the stem. It should be right there. Yeah. You can wiggle them back up. Now while I'm holding this, my thumb and first finger are trying to massage that joining point into a really tight joint there. So you can squeeze. And then let's get my third. This center rose. There we go. Wants to migrate as well. Always adding to the outside. Now I'm going to back up this way and add another dianthus. Rotate. Have to look at it from the top. Save those for the leaf work. And that one rose sank. Rose stems are slick, and so they want to slide down in there. Now once you get this, I'm always angling and adding, turn, add, turn. You don't have to do it that way. I know I'm adding in this direction, so I can just open my hand up a little bit and add another campanula. It's still in the same angle. I don't have to turn it every time. Now I do have to turn it.
Can you show us the bottom again? Facing toward me. Okay, and then to the side.
I'm sorry?
To the side again. Just hold that for a second.
So I'm gonna finish this off. I think you get the idea here. Put another campanula across there. You could use one way over here. Back in there. It's always nice to have some depth. So flowers up, some down. Don't want that. So I think I'm gonna just call it quits here.
Can I get some cellophane for you to show how it can be presented?
Oh, sure.
Where would that be?
It's either there or behind the screen. Now, in order to cover the bottom of this, you could use some solid large leaves like aspidistra, rolled aspidistra under there. You could use a salal, something that's going to give the base so you don't see this, so a sort of a backing. You can also use, if you wanted a little more bridal in nature, one of the Italian ruscus. And what I'm going to do is add that again with a slant. And then I'm just going to grab the tip and I'm going to it's very flexible, and I'm going to pull the tip all the way around and work it underneath, and then the tip actually becomes the other end of the stem. So I'm just cutting all the leaves off of the tip, and that's what'll get caught again in the bind of the hand tide, and that provides you with sort of an interesting backing. Still might want a solid leaf or two under there. I can still see an awful lot of stuff. Now, binding is a personal preference. A lot of people bind with anchor tape or bind wire or waxed string. Personally, I like, boy, am I caught in the cords. I like to use a rubber band. So I'm going to do a preliminary cut on this, cutting my stems not as short as they'll end up being at the end, but so that I can do my method of tying or binding. And I use a rubber band. So I chose an orange one so you could see it pretty easily. And I don't know, Nicole, if you could
Rotate a little bit your, there you go.
like that, is you hold the rubber band and you go over the top of your hand with it. So you go all the way around on the top. So the higher you bind this, the better, till you get back around, and then you do a slip. So now the rubber band is inside itself.
Turn again. No, wrong way. Other way.
Well,
There you go.
and you pull as tight as the rubber band will stand it. All the way around, at least once, maybe twice. And I'm going to hold that rubber band for a second. You need to decide a stem that you're going to stretch this over, something that's really strong. Dianthus, no, because they'll break off. The Campanula, which is this one, is pretty soft as well. The Rose, maybe. But boy, this Italian Ruscus is the best. It's tough. And so I'm going to stretch the rubber band over the end of the stem and then just let go, and it will tighten itself all the way around. Now that rubber band will continue to tighten as you finish manipulating here a little bit. And that way now I can do my final cut of the stems. What you want to have happen is, once you do the bind, if your bind is tight enough, when I squeeze this together, the top doesn't close. So I can squeeze this together. We could bind this all the way down with some ribbon. This still stays round. And that's all dependent upon the bind point. If the bind point isn't tight, this will collapse and it'll look like a squished mess up there. But you can also leave them splayed out. Let me finish cutting here. The length depending upon the vase that it's going to go in. But also it's kind of fun to cut the middle ones just a tad shorter than the outside. And then it stands up on the table. Ta-dam! Now that's the spiraling. So when you look at the stems, see how they're in this sort of a rounded spiral. And of course, a few more pieces of greenery underneath to get that A little cleaner under there would be nice, but there's your hand tied. Is that what you needed to see, Katie?
With the cellulose.
Okay. All right. Are there any last minute requests in the live stream? I'm going to go back to Zoom here. Okay, here we go. Back to Zoom.